If everyone on the planet stopped hating themselves overnight, didn't wish to change anything, embraced our uniqueness, how many industries would go bankrupt overnight? Hey, welcome back to your regularly scheduled self-reflection. I'm Tash. This is Things We Say in Therapy, a place to feel seen and heard and to learn new things. You'll hear a blend of psychological insight and my own personal stories. These all center around the more unspoken sides of mental health, things that I don't hear about much that I think are important to speak about. If this information speaks to your experience, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. If it doesn't, then I hope the information is valuable for your growth in the future. Everyone's story is different, and that is perfectly fine. So the topic I want to speak about today is centered around body weight and weight loss and fat phobia. Now, if that is something that you do not want to hear about today, then this is your trigger warning. I know that this sort of thing will be triggering for people who struggle with their weight. We won't be speaking about calorie counting or any kind of diet culture. It's more just the stigma around fat people and how the stigma came about and how it affects people, especially women, day to day. If that is something you'd like to hear about, please keep listening. I think this information is really important and I would love for more people to hear about it. Now, I'm sure if you are a woman that you have experienced distaste for your own body and felt very insecure about your body, at least slightly, right? Everyone I know has experienced insecurity and body issues, but I'm here to tell you that the problem is not your body, the problem is not your weight, the problem is your perspective. I'm telling you that the weight that you need to lose is not always physical. Here are some examples of things that you need to get rid of that are not centered around your body weight. First thing is emotional weight, the shame, obsession with your body, obsession with your appearance, and insecurities, physical insecurities. The second thing is the mental weight, the shame centered around your body and the things that you're insecure about, your internalized fat phobia, your fear of judgment, and your self-criticism. The third thing is social, familial, cultural, and social media. Block, unfollow, delete. Sometimes the heaviest thing that we carry is our self-hate. So why do we feel this way? This is a deep topic. It is deeply ingrained into society because of this history. We're going to have a little history lesson, but I think it's very important to know. Learning these things helped me focus my attention more towards why we feel this way about ourselves, why it's such a widespread thing to hate our bodies and hate our appearance, especially as women. It was easier to focus my attention on that after learning these things rather than focus my attention on my insecurities and hating myself. Diet culture and the beauty industry are multi-billion-dollar industries. They want you to feel bad about yourself. They want you to feel insecure so that you buy their products. Insecurity about our weight and our appearance is manufactured by society. Think about it this way. If everyone on the planet stopped hating themselves overnight and just embraced who we are, didn't wish to change anything, embraced our uniqueness, how many industries would go bankrupt overnight? Think about all the people that are profiting off of you hating yourself. That really changed my perspective on a lot of things. Now, the historical reason we feel this way, the reason why it is deeply ingrained in our society, is rooted in three things: white supremacy, classism and pretty privilege, and the patriarchy. Now, if you're not educated in these things, you're going to be looking at me or listening to me and thinking, wow, this woke bitch needs to shut up. But hear me out. So let's start with white supremacy. I'm going to start by mentioning this amazing book by a woman called Sabrina Strings, and it is called Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fatphobia. Essentially, the point to this is white supremacist European colonizers, they painted enslaved black people as gluttonous sex addicts, and that their gluttonous lack of self-control made them fat. Therefore, the white racists, because they thought of themselves as this superior race, they decided that valuing moderation and discipline and restriction with eating, therefore making them thin, further confirmed how superior they were. It is just the stupidest perspective. So in the 19th century, white people, they saw fatness as a racial inferiority, and it represented immorality and greed. Now, this is graphic, but it's true, so we're going to talk about it. They then started using being fat as an indicator of whether someone was enslaved or not. Because there had been so much rape, there was now interracial people who were part white, part black, and the colour of people's skin was no longer an indicator of whether they were enslaved or not. So therefore, people who lived in fatter bodies were therefore seen as undeserving of living freely and as people who don't deserve respect. Until I was researching for this episode, I had no idea that fat phobia was rooted in the slave trade. I don't know about you, but that made me want to fight against fat stigma even more, because it's infuriating and disgusting. But moving on to classism and pretty privilege. Initially, back in the Queen Victoria era, being fat was seen as a good thing because it meant that you could afford food. It meant you were wealthy enough to put food on the table, enough to be fat. But over time, because of the slave trade and things, the switch has been completely flipped, and being thin is now associated with wealth because you are disciplined and haughty-taughty, and you can afford nutritious, balanced meals, and you have the mental strength for, self-control and all of that. It's very uneducated and silly, in my opinion. So therefore, if you are fat, if you live in a bigger body, you are seen as, in the lower socio-economic field, you are seen as someone who has a lack of self-control, someone who can't afford nutritious food. That is a stigma that's put on you if you are living in a bigger body. Even medical doctors, people who spend years and years studying the human body and its ins and outs, have that stigma. There was a study that was done that I will link below, where medical doctors were shown to have stigmatized opinions of fat people. More doctors did than didn't. They often see fat people and think that they lack self-control. They have moral failures, they can't control themselves around food, they're uncooperative people who want to fuck the medical system, and therefore doctors are more likely to work collaboratively with you if you're thin. Therefore, statistically, you could infer that doctors will help you more if you are a thin person, which is complete discrimination and is ridiculous. I know so many people who have gone to the doctor, and instead of actually working collaboratively with this person because they live in a fat body, the automatic advice without even doing any tests or anything is lose weight. It's because you're fat. It's because or whatever the fuck. The third thing is the patriarchy. So obviously, if you live in the world, you will know that the beauty industry and this push for being aesthetically pleasing and to fit a certain beauty standard is more pushed on women. If you live in the world, you will also know that women didn't used to have a lot of rights, and so this push for being aesthetic and looking a certain way, weighing a certain amount, was used as a form of control over women. You are seen to have less value if you are fat because you have no self-control, you can't control yourself, you have no discipline, you obviously aren't healthy, you don't care about yourself, you get put in this box that is completely made up by people and the stigma when they know nothing about you. It is absolutely unfathomable to me that there are still people out there like the Andrew Tate types who still think that women are just objects to be looked at. How small does your brain have to be? Now, these three things, they all just feed off of each other. I've only done a very brief explanation of these things because if I were to go into a lot of detail, then this episode would never end. But you get the picture. And these three things, they all feed off of each other and accentuate each other to give us the subconscious idea that we constantly need to be striving to be smaller and to weigh a certain amount, fit a certain aesthetic. And I've observed that, and I know this because I used to be like this. If you don't know to educate yourself on these things, you just go through life assuming that that is something that you constantly need to be striving for, and it takes up so much energy and so much space in your brain, and it really just makes you feel terrible about yourself, like constantly, if you don't fit, because a majority of people don't fit in that box where, you know, where you're like stick thin and conventionally pretty. Sorry, I just had a little wee break. So this is not true. We do not have to feel this way. And it all just takes a little bit of educating yourself and some rewiring. So let's destigmatize our brains together. So the first thing that you need to realize is that the beauty standard isn't fixed. It constantly changes to fit different molds so that industries can profit off of your insecurities. If you've noticed different trends surrounding bodies, right? Back in, 2015, the Kardashians had these massive bums, massive boobs, tiny waist. The thick look was in, but only to a certain extent. You had to have no belly and big assets. So women started getting BBLs, they started getting boob jobs, they started wanting to look this way. Then now it's changed again, and the very, very thin supermodel look is back in. So people are getting their BBLs removed, people are getting boob reductions, people are getting disordered eating again, and they're doing it because they want to profit off of you. And I feel like you just need to see that pattern in order to reduce it, resist it, be the resistance, because otherwise you're just going to be spending so much money to change your body that is beautiful it's beautiful naturally, it's beautiful on its own. You don't need to wax and poke and strip and shave ourselves. Who are you trying to please? The only person that needs to be happy with yourself is you. And that starts in here. We need to learn to accept ourselves. We need to learn to accept our natural bodies and then find our own style and show up as yourself, not the latest trend. That free advice is also a money saver. People who think they're complimenting you when they're really not. Weight loss is not an automatic invitation for a compliment. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't hold your hand when I said that. You need to stop complimenting people on their bodies, period. You don't know what they're going through. Weight loss doesn't automatically mean that they are happy with that. It doesn't automatically mean a good thing. It doesn't automatically mean they were trying to. They could be ill. They could be struggling with disordered eating. You just have no idea. And weight loss doesn't equal good. Particularly body weight changes can be a sign of mental health struggles. But a majority of people will see this as an achievement without knowing what's going on with that person. Number 3, your weight is not a determinant of your health status. Someone who is fat doesn't automatically mean that they are unhealthy. It doesn't mean they don't exercise. It doesn't mean they overeat. Some people just have bigger bodies, period. You cannot tell how healthy someone is by the size of their body. So stop judging them so. Number 4, gaining weight can be a sign of healing and of freedom from disordered eating and unnecessary food restriction. It can be a sign of happiness, of mental and spiritual growth. Some people need to gain weight in order to be living in a body that is meant for them. Not everyone's body is supposed to be a size 6. If you're exercising regularly, you're eating a healthy, balanced diet, you're mentally well, that is probably your healthy body. That is probably the body that you're supposed to have, even if it's bigger than a size 6. Number 5, and this is a big one. Fat is not a dirty word. This one really, really annoys me, and I've noticed it more since gaining weight. I was thin my whole life, by the way. I was a size 8 to 10 my whole life. I started gaining weight about 3 years ago. Let me tell you, when my perspective on life has changed, oh my goodness, I will do an episode on that. But it's changed for the better. I'm just going to put that out there. Fat people describing themselves as fat, and a herd of people automatically jumping to say, oh my God, no, you're not. Don't say that about yourself. Without realizing that the insulting part is not the fat person calling themselves fat. It's you assuming that them calling themselves fat means they're calling themselves ugly or disgusting. By doing that, you're inferring that by them being a fat person, that is something to be ashamed of and something that they need to hide and not talk about. It isn't something that they need to hide. It isn't something that is taboo and that shouldn't be talked about. And if you think that it is, then you need to engage in some self-reflection. Number 6, pushing yourself to do excessive exercise to change how you look instead of exercising to be healthy. If you're having to restrict your diet and constantly count calories and engage in diet culture and excessively exercise and restrict yourself in order to get to a certain body type that you're desiring, I'm sorry to break it to you, but I just don't think that is the body type that is meant for you. I think your time is more worthwhile investing in accepting yourself, learning how to intuitively eat and not restrict, learning how to exercise in a way that nourishes your body, in a way that makes you feel good without pushing yourself too far in order to burn calories and lose weight. It's okay to live in a bigger body. It's about accepting yourself. Stop letting society control how you view yourself. Stop letting society make you hate yourself. So let's get on to how to deal with this. Let's get on to how to start accepting yourself, the way you look, and recognize certain stigmas that you may have about yourself and other people. So the first step is to recognize your internalized fat phobia. The first step, I think, is to reflect on how you feel when you imagine yourself gaining some weight. Does this make you stressed? Does this make you worried? Does this make you anxious? How would you feel about yourself if you did gain weight? What would you do? How would your behaviors change? Secondly, where does your mind go when you think about losing weight? Is this something that you think about obsessively? Do you often restrict yourself? Do you think about dieting often? Now, it is common to be anxious when you're thinking about gaining weight, and it is common to think about dieting a lot and restricting yourself. But that doesn't mean it's healthy. It's common but not healthy. And the first step is to recognize this. Recognize the scary idea that the way that you look right now is never going to be fixed. We age. We're humans. You can't stop yourself from aging. God forbid, get in accidents, and that can change how you look. Or it can make you disabled and you're no longer able to be as active as you used to be. Mental health challenges happen when you have hard life experiences. Depression and anxiety can cause you to gain and lose weight all the time. Recognizing that the way that we look is never guaranteed is important, because we need to realize that who we are on the inside, and putting your time towards changing how you think about yourself from the inside rather than changing how you look on the outside to make yourself feel better on the inside. We need to work on how we view ourselves and our insecurities from a mental growth perspective, rather than trying to inject and needle and wax ourselves into feeling better about ourselves and to try and fit in with current trends. Imagine the freedom of no longer caring about how you look. Imagine the freedom of no longer having that weight of other people's opinions on you all the time. Now, it's actually quite fun to embrace your authenticity. Since I've had this massive epiphany and change in my perspective since gaining weight and things like that, changing my life around quite a lot, figuring out who I am, figuring out my style in terms of physical appearance, figuring out my own style, learning to embrace who I am, it has been so liberating and so fun to find out all these new things about myself. And it didn't even start with me being excited about who I am. It started with me just having neutrality about myself. I changed from disliking who I am and having, intense body dysmorphia about certain aspects of myself, all these terrible insecurities, to just saying, well, this is who I am and I'm going to accept that. That's how it started. And then as soon as you get used to having that, you no longer have the constant negativity of hating on yourself all the time. It's easier to embrace who you are and learn to make it fun, to learn your style and learn new things about yourself. Nothing is more liberating than engaging in radical acceptance of everything. The more you resist, and I'll do an episode on this as well, the more you resist to the reality of things, the more unhappy you will be. If you're constantly trying to change yourself, you're resisting the reality of who you are, and it's making you unhappy. It's making you constantly need to chase this new thing. But you're never going to be happy unless you just accept it, the way that things are. And always self-compassion. I mention this in every episode. Self-compassion, self-compassion, self-compassion. Be nice to yourself. If you're struggling to change the way you think about yourself, if you're struggling to accept yourself the way you are, just be kind. It's okay. You've had a lifetime of listening to society's expectations and trying to follow all of these new trends and abandoning yourself and rejecting yourself, and it's hard to stop doing that after having it as a habit for so long. So just be kind to yourself. The last thing as well is acknowledging how the people that you associate yourself with are talking about themselves. It's wise to distance yourself from people who speak poorly of themselves or of fat people or make fun of how other people look in their appearance. You're likely to adopt the same behaviors as these people, and they're likely to make you feel bad about yourself. People who hate themselves and the way they look tend to spread a lot of negativity, even if it's indirect. I used to be friends with people who were clearly much smaller than me, and they would sit next to me and be pinching their stomach and, longingly wanting to look like supermodels, and I was sat there like covering myself up with a blanket and a pillow because I was so ashamed. Hanging out with people like that is never going to be good for your self-esteem, even if you have like really strong morals like I do. Indirect insults like that are really hard to deal with because they haven't insulted you directly, but you feel the shame as if they have. It just breeds negativity. It accentuates the rules of beauty standards and the patriarchy, and people who don't understand that will spread that onto you, and it just breeds comparison and judgment and all those negative things. And you don't want to be comparing yourself to anybody. You want to embrace your uniqueness and your authenticity. You can be there for people like that. You can tell them that they look amazing and that they're amazing the way that they are uniquely as themselves, but you can only gas people up so much when they're depending on external validation, because confidence needs to come from within. They need to learn how to do it themselves. You can only lift other people up so much. So yeah, be self-aware and be kind. Be aware that sometimes the way that you speak about yourself doesn't just affect you. So thank you so much. I hope that you've learned something from this episode. It's a very important topic to me. It's very rife in society, and I think that education about this stuff is very important. All of the factual information that I spoke about in regards to the white supremacy and the book by Sabrina Strings, the articles that I used for research will go in the description below if you wanted to do your own research. The history of fatphobia and the racial and hierarchical origins are really quite interesting, and like I said before, they really helped me with getting out of that cage of feeling like I needed to live up to the societal expectations. This has been episode 5. This is a judgment-free space, so feel free to comment things that you've struggled with in the past, any stories that you want to share about this topic, anything else that's related to this that you want to hear me talk about. Finally, remember to speak kindly to yourself and to others, and I'll see you again. Bye.